Heartshadow is an exotic heavy sword in Destiny 2. For the intrinsic perk, it is Exhumation. Heavy attacks made with full sword energy turn you invisible and fire exploding void projectiles. When using a heavy attack with full energy on the ground, this sword fires 4 void orbs that explode after a short travel or on contact. At the same time, you will be invisible for 6.5 seconds. The timer says 7 seconds for the invisibility, but the actual duration is 6.5 seconds. Heartshadow's exotic trait is Shut in the Dark. Remaining invisible grants his weapon increased damage for a brief duration. Hitting a target with this weapon's projectile while Shut in the Dark is active weakens them. Once you stay invisible for 1 second, you will get a buff named Shut in the Dark. This buff expires if you stay out of invisibility for 2.5 seconds. While you have this buff, you deal 25% increased damage with this sword. Additionally, if the projectiles are fired from this weapon while the buff is on, they apply 15% weakened debuff on enemies. The source of the invisibility can be anything, and you don't need to have the sword out for the buff to be ready. The activation and expiration of the buff happens in the background even if you have other weapon out. This buff can activate when you have no ammo as well, and damage increase applies normally. Heartshadow's catalyst is Wraithwalk. Faster movement while invisible. While you're invisible, you gain around 50% increased movement speed. You need to have the sword out to get the benefit of this catalyst. You don't need to have a sword ammo for this effect, which I'm not sure if it is a bug or not. Heartshadow is an interesting weapon. When I first saw this weapon, I immediately thought this is a weapon like Black Talon, but after using it for once, I realized that's not the case. The projectile firing mechanic on Heartshadow isn't to deal with enemies in the range, but more of a means to apply weakened debuff easily in a wide range. It isn't easy to come by a weapon that can deal a good amount of damage and apply debuff at the same time, so the debuff itself already makes this a weapon to consider for some activities. Speaking of weakened debuff, everything good about this sword revolves around invisibility. Now, I did the video on Collective Obligation previously, and I said that one of the biggest flaws of Collective Obligation is that it revolves too heavily around Void subclass. While Heartshadow revolves around invisibility as well, luckily for us, this sword provides its own way of applying invisibility, and it does it very efficiently. You can get full energy while staying in invisibility provided by this sword, meaning that you can stay invisible the entire fight as long as the ammo count allows you to. Using Void subclass for more means of invisibility does help, but it's definitely not the necessity, and I don't think there is a noticeable gain anyway. But not every weapon is perfect. While Heartshadow does have a good DPS since it's a sword, there are other swords that do better DPS, namely Lament. Even though the time to activate the perk is very short of 1 second, it still is a 1 second of doing nothing, and it only lasts 2.5 seconds, so there will be a lot of time either doing nothing, or dealing damage with no perk activation. However, the weakness debuff Heartshadow applies is for all damage sources, and not just Heartshadow. Meaning that if you're in the situation where the sword is a perfect option, and you need weakness debuff, this sword got you covered easily. Just note the debuff doesn't stack, so if there already is another source of debuff, say, another Heartshadow user, it may be better off to use something else for better DPS. Thank you for watching. I will see you on my next video.